today. We have Melanie Piche, Elaine, LeBlanc, and John Panagakos, who are joining Russell. And if this is your first time joining one of our virtual events, my name is Shannon, and I'm the Community Engagement and Events Manager at Russell Alexander Collaborative Family Lawyers. And today I have the pleasure of introducing the four of our speakers. But before I do, I'll just let you know what we have on the agenda today. So in today's Family Law Now live virtual event, the panelists will be discussing how separation and divorce can impact real estate transactions. And our panelists will mainly be focusing on the following topics related to real estate and family law. So they'll be discussing ownership, sale of the home, the role of the mortgage broker, and they'll also be discussing other important considerations throughout this process. And the presenters will also be answering audience questions throughout the presentation. Like Russ mentioned, we're honored to have such a large turnout today, and we have already received several questions from the audience, but our speakers will do their best to answer as many questions as possible as time allows throughout the presentation. Now, without further ado, I'd love to take a moment to share more about our panelists that we have here today. So first, we have Melanie Piche, who is a real estate broker and co-owner of the Brell team, Upstaging and the Bespoke Realty Brokerage. Over the past 15 years, the Brell team has been helping buyers and sellers across the GTA and Hamilton. Their unique wraparound services and support have led them to gain niche expertise in facilitating more difficult sales, and they are often called upon to help divorcing sellers. Melanie's no-nonsense approach to real estate can be found on her blog, getwhatyouwant.ca. Make sure to include that in our show notes. And she's also a regular contributor to real estate podcasts and a speaker at real estate conferences and events across North America. Next, we have Elaine LeBlanc, and Elaine is a third-generation realtor at Properties Unlimited Realty. She's also a real estate coach, trainer, and consultant with a designation as a real estate collaboration specialist, divorce certification as certified divorce specialist, and certified divorce coach. She specializes in first-time home ownership and second-time home ownership, purchase, and sale of properties before, during, and after divorce, and complex real estate investment properties. With extensive knowledge and experience, Elaine provides consulting services to clients as a neutral party, offering alternative solutions and buyout division of property options. Elaine is also a certified family mediator and the founder and CEO of Elaine LeBlanc Mediation and Coaching. She empowers women, men, and families to make informed decisions during significant life changes. Next, we have John Panagakos, who is a licensed mortgage agent and the creator of the service Separation Mortgages, where he's able to assist in all aspects of financing as it pertains to a separation. John has significant insight into property matters pertaining to separating couples and will create a process and solution complemented with positive cash flow for clients. John is a published author and a contributing author with LexisNexis within the Family Law Module series, providing the separation and divorce mortgage perspective. And last but not least, we have Russell Alexander, who is the founder and senior partner of Russell Alexander Collaborative Family Lawyers. And with 25 years of experience, he uses his knowledge and expertise to service clients in all aspects of family law and helps them in coping with the difficulties of separation and divorce, the division of assets such as homes and pensions, and the calculation and enforcement of child and support. He uses his experience to create unique solutions. And Russell has written 3 books on separation and divorce and is a fully trained collaborative practice lawyer. He shares his knowledge and experience by speaking at conferences on collaborative practice, marketing, technology, and the law. And on that note, I will let Russell take it away.
Thank you for those kind words, Shannon. Let's run the first poll. But before you take off on us, can you offer, we haven't done this in a while, can you offer the guarantee today?
Oh, it's been a long time, Russ. So we've, for this complimentary webinar, we always offer a money back guarantee, but we hope we won't have to do that. We hope everyone's happy today with today's presentation.
Very generous of you. All right. And thank you, Shannon. So let's get at it. We've got our poll question. Please let us know who you are. Helps us understand our audience. We can tailor our information accordingly. So we're going to give everybody a minute just to complete the poll. And we do have an audience question. I'm going to throw it to Elaine and Melanie. How are letters of opinion generated? Is it absolutely necessary an agent walks through the house, or is doing comps enough? Who wants to take that one?
I can take that one.
Sure.
I think, it's something we often get approached with. And while we are technically able to give valuation, we always recommend in cases of divorce or separation to bring in a certified appraiser. And that way they're completely neutral. It's not the agent who bought or sold the house. And they're just doing a much more thorough opinion letter that can be used in court rather than sort of somebody's opinion. I mean, we've got 70,000 agents in the Toronto area, and some of them only sell a couple houses a year. So that's not the person you want making such an important valuation. So we always suggest you bring in an appraiser.
But if my neighbor's house just sold, let's just say I live in one of these cookie cutter communities, all the homes are the same. Neighbor's house just sold for $1 million. Do I really need to pay $500 or $1,000 for an appraisal?
It really all depends on the situation. If you are having a both parties, to make sure that they're both having the value correctly, an appraiser actually can evaluate the property, whether there's any problems in the property that need to be addressed. But yeah, the value that you do get value from having an appraiser coming in, and it's worth it by knowing what the value is for the amount of money that you're paying for that.
I assume you can refer your clients to appraisers you work with, or your lawyer could probably help you.
Yeah, and I also recommend that you pick an appraiser that is somebody who specializes in divorce. And if you need to go to court, that appraiser can also then go to court if need be.
Let's get John in on this. John, banks have their own favorite appraisers, right? Sometimes they have their own list that they use, or they'll take anything.
Yeah, no, they won't take anything. So each bank is very unique. So if someone goes directly to the bank, they'll have a specific list that they need to use, and sometimes that value can be considered low. We've heard certain complaints when people are walking into their everyday branch and their valuation is not necessarily the greatest. If you're using a broker has a list of appraisers that they can use that are approved within certain banks. So there's advantages to both, and the value of a good mortgage broker certainly has his or her weight in gold.
The bank gets its own appraisal. That's the bank's document, right? The client doesn't get that, do they?
No.
Okay. So really, you lose a lot of control that way. So anyway, let's get to our poll question here. Thank you, everybody, for answering. Lots of results here. Family law professional or legal professional, 46%. Lots of real estate lawyers here. Thank you for joining us. Different profession, real estate agent, broker, profession from a different field, going through separation and divorce, and law students. Thank you. We always love when the students show up. All right, let's go into ownership. So we'll just do a bit of background here. Each one of these topics we get into, we could easily spend an hour talking about each one. We're just doing a high level overview. If you want to learn more about some of these topics, Shannon will put into the chat or in the survey or the show notes links to additional programs. But common law spouses, sometimes this gets overlooked, right? Matrimonial homes, married couples, they need independent legal advice, need to consent, sign off on it. Common law, in law, it can vary. Usually, in my view, when the toothbrush shows up, you're living common law. And so there's some considerations not only the real estate agents need to consider, but the real estate lawyers and the family lawyers need to consider. We're going to get into a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about certificates of pending litigation, which common law spouses can apply for, which blow up deals, it clouds title, and law deals fall through. We'll get into that a little bit more. So common law couples, you want to be really mindful of the tips and the traps that these couples pose for all the professionals involved. And this is really when divorce directly intersects with the sale of real estate. And that's what our subject is today. So let's go into our poll question, poll number 2, see what our audience thinks. Can I kick my common law spouse out of the house? This is a tough one. And I just wrote an article on this. We'll put the link into the show notes. We have a video on this subject as well. It's difficult when I have clients ask me about this question. Sometimes the owner of the home, the spouse that owns the home, will call the police, and police shows up and removes the person. I'm not sure if they should be doing that. Other times, the police won't do anything. So it's a tricky question, and it depends if there's children involved potentially, but let's see what our audience thinks of this particular poll question. All right, can you kick them out? Yes, 15%, no, 33%, only if you call the police. Need an eviction order. Depends if they're children, and other, 22%. So let's get into, that's a lot of this is going to turn on the length of the relationship. I think you should be going to family court to address the matter, not phoning the police. Whether there's children involved, there's, the classic answer, it depends, right? Depending on the nature of the relationship and the family, court may or may not remove a spouse. If the spouse is going to be removed through a court order, usually there'll be time for that spouse to leave. There'll be security put in place so if they're making a claim to the home as a common law spouse, that the equity will be preserved. There could be a payment of money up front to enable that spouse to find a new location and give them 2 or 3 months to do so. So there's a variety of options that are available when this issue comes up. Let's go into our third poll. We're just going to do some rapid fire polls here, and then we're going to get to our panelists. Poll number 3. Is a family cottage brought into the relationship considered a matrimonial home and subject to division? So this is another hot button issues that all of us as professionals deal with. You have these legacy cottages. Oftentimes they've been in the family for 2 or 3 generations. And now that cottage may be subject to sale because of it can be treated as a matrimonial home. Which creates a lot of frictions amongst many generations of families. Oftentimes they vacation there together, a lot of memories, a lot of emotion attached to family cottages. Very difficult items to deal with, but let's see what our audience thinks on this poll question. Is it a matrimonial home? Yes, 12%. No, 14%. It depends on how much time is there. Sophisticated audience, I think that could be my answer. Depends if the parties were married, other 9%. So yeah, short answer is you can have multiple matrimonial homes, including a cottage. So that's something you want to be mindful if you're a real estate lawyer representing these clients, if you're a family lawyer litigating the matter, if you're a real estate broker, or even a mortgage broker, these are considerations that you want to take into. So what happens to cottages and investments jointly owned or individually purchased? What do you think of this, Elaine?
So I mean, if it's jointly owned, it gets divided, and individually purchased before marriage, or if it's an investment property, then the value of the increase is given on the marriage, unless a prenup stipulates no division, or some other terms or a written agreement that they both agreed to.
All right, thank you for that. So short answer is it's going to be subject to division, is what I hear you saying. Is this jointly owned asset?
Yeah.
So let's get into the sale of the home. And what do you do if your spouse is using the process of the sale as a weapon? So won't cooperate with getting the house ready, choosing an unrealistically high listing price, refusing to sign paperwork. So we've all had clients like this. Some people just don't want property to be sold. They're scared of moving, or they're trying to frustrate the process. There's a number of options on the table that you can consider. You can consider getting an order for exclusive possession of the home and removing that person from the home. Those orders are sometimes difficult to obtain. You can certainly get a court order for the sale of the home. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but you're going to want it to be as detailed as possible, because if there's any kind of wiggle room, the vexatious litigant or the spouse trying to frustrate the sale of the home will use that. And ultimately, you can use the contempt power of the court. So if you have a court order, the person's not complying, and it's a clear order, the court can exercise its contempt powers to enforce the order, which can range from fines to imprisonment to a number of things. So Court orders are not suggestions. They're required to be followed, and you may have to enforce the order if somebody's frustrating the sale of the home. Next one, who is allowed to sell the home when both, have you guys had experience before we get this with clients who don't want to sell the home or are frustrating the sale? What's been your experience? Elaine or Elaine?
Sorry. You know, the court can issue the sale of the property. We list it, and when an offer comes in, either for the approval can be from the spouses, you know, for approval, and then go back to you know, the clients for them to approve it. If the clients don't approve it, it may have to go back into court for approval. So either or.
It's definitely something we've come across where one party doesn't want to leave the relationship or leave the home. And there's lots of options before you get to the court place too, right? In terms of just, okay, let's talk about what's really happening here. And certainly we've mediated through a lot of the situations. And I mean, the unrealistic high price is a really common one for us, where someone decides their house is worth, you know, they're happy to list the house at $500,000 more than it's worth. And so that could take a lot of communication and back and forth and really try and get to what's happening before the courts have to get involved. And oftentimes we are successful in being able to mediate to a place where everybody is comfortable and we're able to move forward. But obviously there's times when we need the courts as well.
Oftentimes people are at different stages of separation too, right? It's maybe the one who's decided the relationship's over is ready to move on. The other one's still angry and soaking it all in. Or there could be kids issues, right? Maybe they don't want to move out of that school district, or they're not going to be able to afford to buy in that neighborhood. John, have you had to deal with these issues before?
Similar. So we've had issues in the past where people, there's one person that needs the sale to happen because they've gone off and purchased a new property. So they need the proceeds of that sale in order to move forward. Right. So sometimes
like the market, right? Everybody's going to get paid through the process.
Right. So sometimes the market conditions state, hey, you know what, we're not selling right now because maybe the Bank of Canada increased rates and maybe buyers have gone off to the sidelines, unfortunately. So there's definitely perspective, and it's there is a solution, but it's trying to get both people to agree can be difficult sometimes, and sometimes, you know, situations are out of everyone's control.
Right. Leads us into our next topic, right? Who's allowed to sell the home? One or more parties are entitled. Well, you can certainly get an order for sale under the Petition and Sale Act. Those are very difficult to defend against. They're almost always ordered to be sold by the court because to that stage. The few exceptions are if there's young children in the home or exigent circumstances, the court may delay the sale. And that could be pretty prejudicial to the person who wants it to go ahead. If you think about the market a year ago, it was taking off, right? And they're losing out. And now it's starting to get a little bit softer. So market conditions could really affect whether or not the timing of the sale occurs, not or vice versa, right? The sale will determine. But the next slide, we're going to talk about certificates of pending litigation, and these can be nasty business. So what we're looking at, oftentimes we'll see, I'm seeing a lot more of these with common law couples. So as common law couples, through the common law, are acquiring more property rights. Not through the legislation. Family Law Act deals with married couples, but common law couples can claim certain interests in the home. They can claim a constructive trust interest if they've done improvements. They can claim a resulting trust interest if they've paid money into the deposit of the home or making, for example, mortgage payments or capital payments. They can also make joint family venture claims. So if the family operated as a joint family unit, these are trust claims. So even though they're not entitled, they may say, I've got an equity interest in this home. So they can go to court and ask for a certificate of pending litigation that's registered on title, which means nobody's going to buy this property because it's got a clouded title. And I'm sure John, I assume the bank's not going to fund any new mortgages on it until the certificate's removed. Would you agree with that? Because they don't want it as priority.
Yeah, I would agree. They always want clear title. Right. So it becomes even more challenging.
Right. And oftentimes, the real estate agent won't even know when it's registered. It might get registered after a deal has been signed. They're set to close, and then 10 days before the deal, the real estate lawyer doing the title search says, we've got this problem. So now you potentially are going to have damages if that deal doesn't close, or you're going to lose it on your commission, or you have to wait for the family court to decide the matter. So it creates a lot of leverage for the one person who has the certificate to maybe negotiate a settlement of the family law claims, but it also creates a lot of headaches for all the professionals involved. So if you're acting as a family lawyer or a real estate lawyer, you want to do a title search, make sure no common law spouses or other people are making a claim to the property before you make any deals. And certainly it might be a useful tip for real estate agents too, to be mindful of. But we're seeing more and more of these certificates being registered, and more common law couples seem to have much stronger claims to property because of recent decisions we're seeing coming out of the family court and also out of the Court of Appeal. So order for sale. You've gone through all of the headaches. You can't agree. You're going to get an order for sale. Elaine, what should we be looking for with these orders?
So I kind of touched a little bit on that. Just basically that, when an offer comes in, both couples can agree to that. The court will issue information to us as real estate agents. We work with the two parties, and then if they approve, it's more helpful for them to be able to approve it. And if not, then it goes back in, I believe, into the courts as well too.
Melanie, have you ever had any experience with these orders?
Not personally. Some of the people on my team have, and I think we've seen all different options have happened at some point.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes smoothly, sometimes it doesn't.
I guess my tips would be as specific as you can in the order. What I like to do in the order is to say they're going to defer to the real estate agent's reasonable recommendations. So if an offer comes in and the agent's recommending it, there's some, discretion to the agent. If the agent's acting unreasonably, you can go to court and have it reviewed. But oftentimes, if that ever occurs, it's usually the person selling the home is being unreasonable. The agent just wants to close the deal and move on to the next transaction. So I like having some deference to the agents. Also, it takes, if there's an unreasonable litigant or an unreasonable seller, sort of takes the power out of their hands to avoid the sale or delay it further. All right, so we have the order. We're going to list the property for sale. Who chooses the real estate agent? How does that go about? Melanie, what do you think?
Well, it's always one of the challenges, and we always like to say, you want to talk to multiple people, and most importantly, you want to choose somebody who is experienced in divorce situations. Again, going back to my people have all sorts of experience. There's a really unique skill set. There's also a lot of unique soft skills that are important in terms of mediating between people and communicating and keeping everything on the up and up so that everybody feels that they've been fairly treated and that the realtor hasn't favored one person or another. So those are all really important considerations, and to really interview people and ask them how they plan to communicate. If the spouses don't want to be copied on any emails with the other person, for example, which is pretty common. Okay, what does that look like? Okay, so we can agree early on, this is what the communication looks like. So some really different questions that you have to ask when you're choosing that realtor. It's not as easy as just going back to the person who sold you the house.
All right. Elaine, what do you think? How do you go about picking an agent, or how do your clients pick an agent when there's a sale order?
Clients usually, both spouses usually have maybe somebody that they both want. And then, I believe that they more or less, and they bring in more than one agent, sit down and then kind of see which agent's the best one for both of them. We should be a neutral party for both of the parties. And, you're going to touch a little bit on the communication part because, what are their expectations from you? What information are you providing to them for it to go smoother? But you should pick a realtor that really is dedicated to selling the property and making sure that they're getting the best value in terms of price.
Right.
And I think it's really important that you're honest with your realtor when you're, or the people that you're meeting with. I mean, so many times we'll meet with spouses and they're not talking about divorce and they're holding hands, for example. We meet with them and we're like, those people are divorcing, and we're going to find out on the day of close. That happens all the time.
Right.
And we could be so much more helpful if we knew early on what the situation was, because this is something we're trained to deal with. So I think that's really important, is just being honest with the situation so that the realtor can work with you, as opposed to maybe suggesting strategies that would make sense if, you know, you were in fact holding hands and happily married, and not in a different situation where you're, you know, looking to part ways. I think that's really important.
A lot of time they use the agent that they use to purchase the home, right? They trust that person there. I've seen a lot of times, what we suggest, if they're in a logjam and can't agree, we'll say, okay, you pick 3 agents and the other person will pick one of those 3. Is another way to get over that, or vice versa, right? So, and usually you can meet with the agents and get to know them a little bit as well.
And the family lawyers often have good recommendations as well, because they know who's experienced in that field. So if people can't agree, I think in the GTA, the average person knows 7 realtors. So everybody knows a lot of realtors, and kind of narrowing that down to the right one, I think can be really helpful when you go to your own counsel that you already trust.
Yeah. And I guess the suspicion comes when you know the realtor too well, right? And you think, okay, well, there's gonna be some hijinks going on, or I'm gonna get shortchanged, or that's when people start to lose trust, right? When if the relationship to the agent is just not arm's length.
Absolutely. And sometimes you can also work with 2 realtors who are working together. I mean, people on our team, we have 2 agents that always team up. And it's not, and it's a man and a woman, and they're not always partnered up with the man or the woman on the other side, but they're really looking for that connection. So they'll often go in and meet with a couple together and see, like, okay, that could be your primary communication person. And then behind the scenes, the 2 realtors are doing a whole lot of conversations, but then they're able to represent, you know, each party, but still to get together, but everybody feels like they've got someone to listen. And that's worked well for us in a lot of cases too.
Co-listing, yeah, and more exposure too, right? So lots of questions coming in. Thanks to the audience for sending all your questions in. Lots are coming in on this idea of notional disposition costs. So if you sell the home, you're going to pay 5-6% commission. You're going to be paying your legal fees. You might be paying a penalty to get out of your mortgage. So we can be, depending on the value of the home, you know, it could be easily into it for $50,000 that you're going to be out of pocket just to dispose of this home, maybe even more. So one of the questions is, well, if they're just selling it to each other, do you get to take the notional disposition costs off? Court of Appeal would say no if you're going to stay in the home. Oftentimes, case management judges will say, well, cut it in half, say 2.5% plus a reasonable amount for notional legal fees. That takes the issue off the table, because the person buying the home off that particular spouse is going to incur those notional disposition costs at some point. So a lot, 3 or 4 questions is coming in rapid fire in this one, touching on that a little bit. But let's go to our next subject. So communicating with your realtor. We've got 2 great realtors with us. Tips and tricks. What do you guys suggest for not only your clients, but also for the lawyers representing them? What's the best way to communicate? What are your recommendations?
Well, sometimes there's challenges with that where, you know, one spouse doesn't want to be, you know, added on an email at the same time. So separate emails are, you know, sent to each party, but we're providing the same information to both clients. And Melanie did touch on, you know, if you have 2 realtors that you're working with in your brokerage, that can help. That actually can be helpful. And you know, we're always, you know, keeping both informed about any concerns or any problems with the property. And, you know, we're acting as a neutral party for the sale of the home. And, you know, trusting your realtor is going to be able to help you through the process is, you know, one of the top things when you're communicating with your realtor as well, too, knowing that they're going to provide the best services for you.
And I think keeping as much as you can in writing, anything important in writing, so that we know both parties got the exact same thing. So
Yeah,
it's not just, if someone's valuing it at home, you don't want them to be like, it's $1,050,000. And you want someone who's going to go through and put a lot of effort into that, so both parties can see how it got there. Everyone's getting the same information. So we really discourage phone and text messaging, unless everybody's okay and we're all doing it together. Do everything in writing. That way we know everybody got every important decision and an opportunity to look at the pros and cons, and then got all the same information.
Same message, same time.
Yeah.
Separate emails or group emails? What do you like?
We set that up in advance, and communication is a big part of what we talk about when we first meet people. What do you want? I mean, our theory is always that, we communicate the way our clients want us to. It doesn't matter if we prefer one method or the other. Person pays the bill, gets to decide how to communicate. So whatever the clients choose.
And John, are the mortgage brokers working with the real estate agents during this process, or are they more working with the family lawyers?
Depends on the dynamic, right? So we often will reach out to the lawyer and to the real estate agent to introduce ourselves. And if there's anything that anyone needs, we're here for them, and we expect the same courtesy if something was to arise. But just to a previous point, when you talk about commissions, quite often, like I know Melanie and Elaine are very seasoned, but when you talk about commissions or any sort of service, we always have to add the HST, because that's one of our biggest hurdles that we see when we're discussing numbers with clients, that often the HST on service is not accounted for. And on $50,000 or a $100,000 sale, that amount of money, although it may not seem like a lot, every penny counts, and it can be the difference between making or breaking another purchase.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. People are asking for the name of the decision from the Court of Appeal. I'll get you that. I don't have my rule book in front of me, but we will include it as part of the show notes. So look for that follow-up. Third party invested, and I'm just going through some audience questions. So parent or granny invest in the home, do they get their money back? Well, if it's a gift or a loan, it's a claim that you should adjudicate in the family court, or the family lawyer should look at that claim. But if it's an investment with the proper mortgage registered on title, you should be getting that money back. Lots of great questions coming in. Thank you so much. Okay, so next slide here. What are we looking at? Why should a realtor who specializes in divorce be the person you talk to? So Elaine, Melanie, why should they go to you as opposed to just one of the other 100,000 real estate agents in Ontario?
Well, I think with working with divorcing clients can be very challenging, extremely challenging, and extremely rewarding at the same time. It's crucial to the client to be aware of, whether it's property law or family law. Both myself and Melanie do not provide legal advice, but we do know the intricacies of what happens with, going through separation and divorce. And particularly when it comes to the sale of the property they reside in at the time of their breakup. So I really, I focus on 5 key points basically with my clients. We probably value the property or properties, depending if it's more than one. And a specialist can help you determine the fair market value of the property, so that no matter, if you're staying in the family home or selling it, you will know what the division of the assets are once the information is provided to your lawyers. And, we discuss all different types of options with clients, whether they're wanting to stay in the property, whether they're wanting to sell the property, whether or not they want to know about the seller's market, if we're in a seller's market or buyer's market. We've gone through a lot of changes prior to COVID, during COVID, after COVID. The real estate market has been up and down. We help basically with, my second point would be, we help avoid costly mistakes. Maybe there's some things that a regular realtor may not be aware of during separation or divorce, the options of, what if a client wants to do a buyout instead of selling the property, giving as much information to that client. Clients are emotionally charged, and sometimes they can make quick decisions. We want them to think about it before they make those decisions. We're a neutral third party. As a third point, we don't take sides. We have experience in cases where, if a couple doesn't settle together, then, what can happen with that? We can provide information or resources in that area. And we really work closely with other professionals like yourself, Russell, lawyers, real estate lawyers, specialists, mortgage brokers, those are the type of things that we provide for our clients with more information, where you don't just get access to having a realtor, but instead an entire network of people specializing in the life-changing events for the clients.
Yeah, great tips. Melanie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that was a great answer. The only things I think I would add is, I think we said it in the bio that this sort of became part of what we did as a result of the fact that we had a lot of wraparound services. So things like staging and decluttering and all of those kinds of things are not fun for anybody, but are way more complicated when you've got two people who aren't agreeing and have to do it. So looking for a realtor who's not afraid to get dirty and get right down in there and do whatever it takes to get the job done is critical in these situations. And I think everything else Elaine said is bang on. I mean, you don't want someone who's just opening doors and listing on the MLS. You really need a partner who is going to understand the emotional side of it as well as the real estate side.
And some people are hoarders, right? There's some kind of attachment to their clutter. They can't let it go. It's
particularly in emotional situations.
Yeah, that's
those
right.
memories are that much more important to the spouse who may not want to leave the relationship.
We have to hang on to that. Yeah. All right. I got a question here for John, but before we get to it, what's happening with the market? I'm reading reports. It's flat. It's good. Condos are getting soft in Toronto. They're strong. 10 seconds or less. What do you think is happening with the market? Let's start with John. Is it getting soft or is it still crazy?
Depending on where you are, right? Like I'm in Toronto and we're seeing multiple bids on houses, right? The Bank of Canada is, threatening an increase next week. I'm not sure if that happens. But you know what? Fixed rates at every major bank went up in the last week and no one said boo. So
still seeing wars on properties?
Pardon me?
Still seeing bidding wars on properties?
In Toronto, we are. Many.
All cash deals?
We're financing a lot of them, but yeah. But I will stress to everybody, the media is great, but the media is also wrong. So if you feel like a property is for you, or you want to move forward with something, then that's your opportunity. Things can go sideways very, very quickly because you never know which way the market is going to swing. But I think the worst is behind us, and people still need a place to live, and rents are through the roof.
Yeah, especially in major centers. Melanie, softening up.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, we're Toronto, GTA, Hamilton. We're definitely seeing the market's been back for about 2 months. Multiple offers are certainly the common thing that's happening. And what John was talking about the media. I mean, that headline last week about condo sales are a disaster. If anyone actually had opened the article, they would see they were talking about new sales. And that's because the developers haven't actually been launching new projects. So, because they're waiting for the prices to be higher. So the condo market's actually really healthy, and we're in bidding wars on almost all of our listings these days. So feeling really good. Certainly the markets that went up the highest during COVID and went down the lowest in the last year are now again the most competitive. So Durham region right now, I mean, 30, 40 offers on a property, not unusual.
Amazing. Elaine, are you seeing the same thing?
Same thing in Toronto, multiple offers. A lot of the agents were listing properties, having an offer date, offers are coming in then. And, it's going for over what the price point is. like Melanie had said too, I mean, and John, you know, as far as the news wise goes, you're best to talk to your realtor or your mortgage broker of what's happening instead of reading what's happening in the news. But we're in a healthy market so far. Our interest rate's going to change or come down. We're waiting for that to see what happens. And, you know, houses are selling.
There's a whole generation who can't get in. We're not going to get into that discussion.
But also look at the headlines that we're speaking of are all very negative in nature.
Right.
A few weeks ago, the city of Toronto said that you can now create multiple units within a single family home very easily, right? So it's much easier now to convert a single home into a duplex or a triplex or a quad, depending on the square footage. And now we're talking about garden homes. So you can turn a house into a business relatively quickly that generates over $100,000, right? So it's how we look at the situation.
And that's going to benefit some and some are going to get left out. So a question came in here, John. Are there any potential financial consequences or penalties for selling a property during a separation or divorce? We're going to get in a little bit deeper, but if you break the mortgage, there's going to be a penalty, right? Potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, there's more often than not, there's a penalty. Some penalties are large and some are small. But then, you know, we talk about something like bridge financing, right? If you're selling a property and say Mr. Smith has gone off and purchased another one and he's not buying and selling on the same day, he needs bridge financing, but all registered owners on that property need to sign the bridge paperwork, which may include the ex-wife. Right. And so that
or husband, you may not be cooperating.
Right. Sure, the ex-spouse, right? So they both need to sign that. And so as Mr. Smith will need to sign the bridge paperwork for the other person if it's needed. So providing that communication well in advance so people understand that they should be playing nicely in the sandbox is crucial to any process.
Okay, let's hear from our audience. It's been a while. Let's run a poll, and who gets to decide what offer to purchase is accepted. So, and this is a good, you know, sometimes I assume it's just the highest dollar amount, but if you have multiple offers with different features in it, who gets to decide? So let's see what our audience is thinking, and then we'll get into this a little bit more. Give everybody just a minute. Oh, let's throw another question out there. Real quick, how do you determine the listing price for the property? Elaine or Melanie?
There's many ways.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. There's many ways. I mean, you're looking at location of the property, what, you know, the type of property it is. You're also looking at, you know, does the house need work done? You know, are you selling as is, or, you know, will there be some work that needs to be done in the property to get a better price? But, you know, we'll do a comparative market analysis of what's happening in the marketplace. And then we show our clients what the prices are that are going for something that's similar, or, you know, because sometimes we have to do adjustments.
Are you going to list it low and hope you get multiple offers?
Well, that can happen sometimes too, where you go into a lower strategy, lower price point, where we say, okay, well, we're going to go a little bit below what some of the houses are selling for to generate more business. And right now with the market, there is multiple offers going through for properties.
Melanie, you take same approach?
Yeah, I think we do it a few different ways. So we always do a historical analysis of, hey, assuming nothing got changed in the house, what would have happened to it since it was purchased based on what happened in the market. We'll do a traditional valuation based on in the neighborhood and looking at similar homes. So we're always trying to kind of look for different trends and get to the same number. And I think it's important to remember that the value of a house is different than the pricing strategy. So, you know, we might think a house is worth 1.5, but given the market conditions, the strategy might be to price low, or it might be to price high, or whatever is happening. So they're two different things. So usually we might think a house is worth something, but our way to get there or get higher is going to involve the strategy.
I assume most of your clients think it's worth more than it is, right? That's sort of the psychology of sellers.
Of course.
I think most people think their house is the best on the block. We actually, one of our intake kind of forms that people fill out is, how would you rate your house compared on a scale of 1 to 10 compared to all your neighbors? Our average rate now is 8, in which not everybody can be at 8. We've had people say 11 or 12.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing, is that emotional connection to home, right? So again, you really need to be able to work with a realtor who's respecting how you see your home, but also understands what's happening in the market and isn't afraid to be truthful with you, because nobody wins when, you pick a realtor because they gave you the highest price, right? That's something that we often see. Somebody goes in, they give like $200,000 more. And I want to hire that person. Well, that person, unless they're buying it themselves, isn't going to magically get you $200,000 more.
Those are the few homes that are on the market the longest, right? So you got to manage expectations and deliver bad advice. Let's see what our audience thinks here. All right, spouses jointly 93% court. Yeah, I guess the court will decide if the spouses cannot. So great answers by our audience. They're tuned right in. All right, holding trust funds after the sale. Elaine, what do we need to know on this one?
I recommend with my clients that a separation agreement should be made in place prior to the sale of the property, or else you're looking at maybe funds remaining in a real estate lawyer's trust fund, and until such agreement is made, it stays there. So it's really important that agreements are made prior to, and that's what I advise my clients, because sometimes if they're unaware of what will happen, they're eager to sell the property and want the money, but it sits there because they haven't made a formal agreement of anything.
And I guess push comes to shove, you go to court, usually the judge will say, okay, we got $1 million home, what's the claim? Claim might be for $100,000, and say, okay, we'll hold that portion, disperse the rest, and get the money out there, because people need the money to make their next purchase. So
True.
John, I know you've been waiting patiently. Role of the mortgage broker, what do we need to know? Or did you want to get in on the trust?
Well, I'll get on the trust, right? Because I think a lot of people automatically assume that you need a separation agreement in order to purchase the property, right? Some bank policy says no. Other bank policy is a hard yes. You need a signed separation agreement before they will move forward on any sort of financing on a property. So when there's funds in trust, but there are funds that are released, or maybe there's money on the side that people can tap into, you can still move forward with a purchase. The answer is it depends, which is not the greatest answer, but every situation is very unique. So as long as you can qualify, you don't necessarily need a signed separation agreement, and you could probably get that approval with your everyday bank.
Okay. Buying out your spouse versus selling it. Penalties, other considerations, what should we look at here, John?
So we'll look at affordability. First and foremost, you need to be able to afford a property, right? You need to qualify, but let's say you can qualify for it, doesn't necessarily mean you can afford $1 million mortgage, right? In most cases, we're going from 2 incomes down to 1. So we need to look at affordability and what your cash flow is like. Sometimes people opt to rent, maybe that's the better alternative. But then we'll do a rent versus buy analysis and say, okay, well, look, if you're renting, that amount of money is the same or maybe even higher than your mortgage costs. So let's look at what's best for you. People like stability, especially if there's kids, and there's something to be said for home ownership, because long term it's quite fruitful.
Okay, let's run our next poll. John, a question came in while we're running this poll. The poll is, can my spouse affect my credit score? So we'll give
sure. If they're
let's see what our audience thinks, but in rates question for you, John. Properties valued over 1 million are different than under. Are regulators increasing that threshold? Are the rates different if it's over $1 million?
Well, so there's a bunch of different rates. So if you're purchasing for less than 20%, you have to pay that CMHC mortgage insurance, and you can't, and those are for properties under $1 million. And so you'll get slightly better rates. However, you still have to pay $30,000-$40,000 in CMHC mortgage insurance, right? But if you're purchasing for over $1 million, traditionally the rates are slightly higher. because there's essentially a little bit more risk involved.
Okay. All right. Let's see what we had a couple questions come in. The lawyers generally charge for funds to be held in trust. No, they may charge if they're cutting checks, but it'd be a small administrative fee. If it's going to be held in for a long time, it should be put into some kind of investment tool. What goes in the separation agreement when one spouse buys another one out releases everything. So you're going to want to talk to an experienced family lawyer or look at one of our programs to talk about that. We can't answer that question in a few minutes or less. Can they affect your score? Yes, 32%. It depends, 18% only on jointly held debt. What's your, all right, thank you to the audience for answering that poll. John, what's your take on spouses affecting each other's credit score? And that leads to credit scores, the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, if they're jointly owned, for sure, right? Or, and it's not necessarily missing a payment. Sometimes people will miss, a payment or two. They'll get back on track relatively quickly. The credit score in that specific situation may not affect your credit score all that much, but we're finding that people who have higher than normal debts are the ones that are experiencing low credit scores, right? Because there's a downward pressure once you're meeting your debt threshold, whether they're jointly debts or not. So we always need to be mindful of that.
You don't pay a joint credit card, or they say they're going to live in the home and assume all the costs and the mortgage, but you realize they haven't paid the mortgage for 6 months. All of a sudden your credit's blown up, right?
Mm-hmm.
You assume they're making payments, but they didn't make payments. Or it could be out of spite. Yeah.
Right. But then in turn, they're ruining their own credit score also. So you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Sure. All right. So what happens when you buy a second home during a separation? What should our clients and the real estate brokers watching expect?
So if you're buying another home, just make sure you can qualify. So get your approval or your pre-approval set, and make sure you disclose everything to your broker or to your banker to make sure that they know that you can qualify. Because if the matrimonial home hasn't sold, you need to be able to qualify for 2 homes at the same time. Other things are we see savvy investors. We have a lot of high net worth people who are constantly investing via the equity of their home, and there's tax efficiencies or tax deductions within their primary residence. We need to make sure that those deductions transfer over into the next property.
Great lead into our next topic. CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, liens on the property. This could blow up a sale too, right, John? Or financing. What should we be looking for here?
Yeah, so there more and more we're seeing this, and this is going to be the trend for probably the next year and a half, because we just came out of COVID. And so we're finding a lot of people are behind on their taxes. And so if there's a lien on your property, it's going to be really, really difficult to A, refinance it, and then B, sell it and then purchase another property, especially if there's a lien. Always be nice to your CRA officer. You get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. And we always make a call to the CRA officer, introduce ourselves, and constantly update them in terms of when they're going to be paid back and how. Banks traditionally do not refinance property in order to pay back the CRA.
So let's say question just came in. You own the house, but your wife has a CRA lien. It's a matrimonial home. That's going to affect your ownership of that house, right?
Yes, sir.
So you're not going to get out of it. You got to deal with the CRA because the title's clouded.
If I can just add something too, I think the importance of being, again, open and upfront with everybody, if this is a possibility, is really important. We have a house closing tomorrow that we've been nervous about a CRA lien on for the last month, and everybody knowing about it, it makes it a lot easier to get to that finish line than finding out about it, 2 days before closing, when, now someone's moving truck has already arrived and we can't close on the property. So again, I think the more forewarning there is and open communication about this kind of stuff, the better.
Yeah, and it's not just CRA, right? There's reliance liens. There's, my dad, he helped us out, and then he put a lien on the property because I'm supposed to pay him back $250,000. So we need to be mindful of things that people quote unquote forget. And sometimes people don't know that they're signing off on a furnace that on page 52, there's something that states that there's gonna be a lien on a property that no one ever read. right? So it's just not CRA stuff. There's multiple other liens that we need to be mindful of also.
Correction liens, see those quite often as well, right? And they can get those fairly easily. So, all right. Well, I can't believe an hour has gone by. This has been so helpful, everybody. Let's get into some Q&A. And look who's back, our DJ, Shannon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to Elaine, Melanie, and John so much for sharing your time and expertise today. That was really informative. Thank you for joining, Russell. And we want to thank everyone in the audience for participating as well. And thank you so much for all of your questions. We have received an overwhelming amount, so unfortunately we won't be able to get to all of them, but just a note that we do keep them on hand. And it just allows us to keep them in mind for future programs or resources that we're creating. So they have been noted, and we will keep those on hand. But looks like we have a few moments to go over a few audience questions. So one question that we have here is, how many letters of opinion from different realtors are needed to come up with the market value?
Who wants that?
I would say 0 from a realtor and 1 from an appraiser.
Yeah, there are some realtors that actually do them, but what people should be aware of is that they can't be used for financing, and it's not an appraisal.
The lawyers will often leave it up to the clients, right? The least expensive, fastest way is letter of opinion. If the party's going to agree on the value.
Yeah.
Appraisals.
And it's just for information, really, Russell, too, that, you know, if the lawyers do want to have an opinion from a realtor, you can use 2 or possibly 3 if there's a, you know, a price.
Go ahead, Melanie.
Difference.
And I think it's good as well when we were talking about, you know, should you hire the person that you bought with or whatever. Part of the challenge is, and we've certainly been asked many times by one spouse, especially if they're trying to buy out their spouse, to be like, can you just give a really low valuation so I can qualify and afford it? And there's a lot of that kind of behind the scenes stuff going on. So a neutral third party who doesn't know either of you, to me, is the way to go on that.
But as a family lawyer, you know, that's one level. The next one would be certified appraisal, and ultimately the market will dictate what the property's worth.
Exactly.
Next one, maybe one more. What do you think?
Yeah, another 1 or 2. We'll see how long. So next one, we have, my ex no longer lives in Canada. My ex will be receiving their buyout. Is there a tax consequence or holdback?
25%.
Who's that paid to? The Queen?
That's, well, so what real estate lawyer, what they need to do is, what they're mandated to do is, if someone's out of country, so we have clients in Australia who've now moved, and so there's a 25% withholding tax until because they want to make sure that there's no capital gains, there's no tax on the sale of the property or from the proceeds of the sale of the property. So there'll be a holdback of 25% unless that has been dealt with. So the CRA is always going to get paid, and they are finding unique ways to hold back funds.
Talk to your tax lawyer. Great question.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we have time for one more just before we sign off here. So last question is, are there any specific documents or agreements that need to be prepared or updated during separation or divorce to facilitate real estate transactions?
I can go through some of those. Maybe Melanie wants to hop on after that. I mean, it's always good for us to know what the property taxes are from the client. Information on the mortgage. Is the mortgage clear? Is it not clear? Are there any penalties that they'll have to pay? That's good for the client to know. Advising clients to talk to the bank if there are any penalties. We need, identification from the clients, signed documentation from the clients. Are there any loans or liens on the property that we should be aware of? So there's many things of documents that need to be signed with realtor.
Melanie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a good realtor is going to get on that again early up front and do that due diligence, so you know what you have to find and whether that's renovation costs or anything else.
Yeah, and typically if you're selling, you're buying, so you want to make sure you qualify. So having your taxes up to date is really important also.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you again to all of our speakers today, and thanks everyone for joining us. That's all the time we have for today. There will be a survey that pops up at the end of this webinar where you can provide your feedback. So please, we always love to hear from our audience as we take it into account for future programs. So that's very much appreciated. So thank you again, everyone, and we hope you have a great day.